Hello, beautiful souls, and Happy New Year. It is now 2025, the time that we are recording this episode of Her Drive. And last year was a fabulous year for me. I was deeply in studies on a myriad of topics, and one of them was actually within the school of today's guest, Katie Silcox, and that was studying Ayurveda. So Katie Silcox is a New York Times bestselling author of the book Happy, Healthy, Sexy Ayurveda Wisdom for the Modern Woman. I have it here with all my tabs. And her latest book is Glowworthy. She is the founder of the Shakti School, a premier online certification school for women-centered holistic wellness. She holds a master's degree in Ayurvedic medicine, is a member of the National Ayurvedic Medicine Association, and is currently pursuing depth studies in Jungian psychology. So hey, Katie, welcome to Her Drive. It's such a blast to see you and to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you. It's always nice when we can get together one-on-one instead of just the group.
Absolutely. Well, you are a master at teaching and holding space and bringing forward not just information that can be utilized for our physical being, but you did such a beautiful job in the training weaving in humor, simultaneously deep spiritual aspects, which my heart really appreciated and loved to see in such an important program. So thanks for doing so.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for seeing what I'm doing. It's nice to have that reflection back. Thank you. Yeah, you know, I am the founder of a school of Ayurveda for women, which people correctly in some ways understand to be about health and fitness and wellness and longevity and all those good things, which it is, but really it is about knowing who we really are and learning how to just really navigate the spiritual aspect of being a human, which sometimes we can really forget.
hmm Yeah, I always call it, I went back to sleep when I forget.
That's exactly what I call it. And now the task is just to keep waking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was first introduced to Ayurveda through a yoga training that I had gone through. And it was really beautiful. And we touched into some key aspects of it, but I didn't realize that there was a spiritual component to it that can be placed. And that goes beyond just praying over your food or blessing it as you're preparing the food. So before we go into the spiritual side, maybe I should ask you, for those who don't know, what is Ayurveda?
What are you talking about? So I always say, as you know, in school, on one hand, it's this cultural folk medicine from India, 5,000 years old, some people say older. It's the way that human beings have been relating to Mother Nature since the beginning of time and attempting to understand how reality and nature works selfishly so that we can work with it and be healthy. But also, as you mentioned, from a spiritual perspective, really seeing ourselves as intrinsically nested within that. And really, if you think about Ayurveda, it's so much bigger than India. It's a first principles worldview of seeing reality, which incorporates modern science, biology, physiology, quantum mechanics, quantum physics. I mean, it really is what the name says, the study of life. And in that way, the study of life is inherently a mysterious, magical, mystical journey.
Beautiful, well described. For those who are more of the analytical mental mindset, is there some quick, like, can you give quick descriptions perhaps of like what doshas are? Because I feel like when someone Googles Ayurveda, they're very quickly going to see the word dosha.
Sure, sure. It's like, you know, this from your studies in yoga. It's like if someone, a layman, comes to yoga, the first thing they think of is the downward dog, right? The poses. So similarly with Ayurveda, what gets a lot of press in the pop culture world is this thing called the doshas, which literally means a fault line, like the way in which things tend to go out of balance. And when you study Ayurveda, you learn that you were born with a particular dosha or particular way that you will tend to go out of balance when pushed. And we divide this into three different core what we could call mind body types. And when you were born, you had this, and it's like never going away, right? And so, what we're attempting to do in Ayurveda is know which one you are and now how you're manifesting it. And so, we break the world down into 5 elements: the principles of stability, the principle of lubrication, the principle of transformation, the principle of movement, and the principle of no element or spaciousness. And when you combine those all together, you get these 3 specific mind body types. So if you've never heard of Ayurveda, some of you out there are more earthy, watery types. And we go into like 250 data points around what these types look like in practicality. But in general, earthy, watery types are going to be a little bit bigger bone structures, tend to carry more heaviness in their muscles and their weight. They tend to be stronger. They tend to have better immunity. They tend to be more resilient. They tend to like to collect things. So there's this whole world, they tend towards the emotions of heaviness, like depression and lethargy and sadness. But on the positive, they are like really loving and really reliable, and they are good friends, and they're loyal, and they stick around because this is the principle of earth and water. It's sticky, it sticks around, and it's the principle that builds buildings. So I always say in class, like, these people make really good human resources and employees because they're like the hard workers that are going to stick around. And then you have the middle group, which is the fire types, which, you and I have a lot of. And I'm looking at your face, and you also have that like kapha element, which is that earth and water. And the fire is your ability to change, your ability to transform, your ability to digest food, your ability to see clearly. And the downside is inflammation, irritation, irritability, self-criticism, criticism of others, burnout. Yeah. And these are like the fire types are like the type A's that are like making lists and getting things done and super achievers. But the shadow side of that is that over intensity that can lead to inflammation and burnout. So we're speaking on both the physical and the emotional and even the more subtle level. And then the last group we call, in that middle group, we call pitta, or the fire type. And then the last group we call vata, which is the air and space type. And it's exactly what you would think. These people are a little more airy. Their bones are lighter. They tend to be light in their frame. It doesn't mean they can't gain weight. They often do, as an attempt to ground their little bodies, their small bones. They're long, they're lanky, they have irregularity. They tend towards dry skin and constipation and forgetfulness. And it's like, my boyfriend's always like, you screwed on the lids halfway. Very vata airy quality. It's like, I don't even finish screwing on the lid because my mind has already flown, flit like a butterfly off to the next task, And so, there's this, we can get into it, and I hope we do, but like in relationship types, it's really funny when you have 2 different mind body types living in the same house. There's going to be some conflict, right? There's also going to be like some goodness in not marrying or dating your type because he or she can help balance you out. And so, like, I could go on and on about the doshas, but that's a really fun part of Ayurveda, to get to know what you were when you were born. And then it gets kind of complicated because then you can go out of balance in every single way of all of the doshas.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for that. Really great breakdown. I think that's super helpful. Well, you'd mentioned the subtle aspects, and I'm curious if we can kind of go into that and what that means as far as looking at like the subtle body, subtle form through the lens of Ayurveda.
Yeah. It's so liberating. I've been doing this. This will be the 8th year we run the program. It starts again in January. Every year, I just get more and more amazed at how these principles speak to my heart and the essence of what I'm going through. And they help me so much in overcoming these really strong challenges of life. And that's the subtlety of Ayurveda. And if you start from the definition of the word health in Ayurveda, which is svasta, which means to be standing or situated in the truth of who you actually are. And, from a more tantric or yogic or even Christian perspective, like the truth of who you really are, we could call your soul, your spirit, and that travels along with you when this body takes its last breath. From a Buddhist perspective, the truth of who you really are is no one, emptiness. And there's so much fullness and so much freedom in that, right? And so we are really, like, it brings tears to my eyes. One of my teachers as a Buddhist, who talks about these 5 remembrances, and Ayurveda and Buddhism and yoga, they're all kind of sisters that are walking to each other home. And in Buddhism, there are these 5 remembrances that really speak to the essence of swasta, or the definition of health in Ayurveda. And I'm going to depress you all, really, but it's really, really freeing. And then you get to the last one, which is, there's a lot of hope. And the first one is that you are going to die. And, like, this isn't a religion. It's just, we can all kind of, unless we're totally deluded, right? And there are some people out there that are like, we're going to live forever, right? But, like, we're going to die. The body, even if you do Ayurveda or whatever you do perfectly, the body's going to get sick. Eventually, the health will be deteriorated. Everyone around you is also going to have this happen to them. Every single thing that you love, everything that you're attached to, is eventually going to change and go. You eventually will lose everything you care about. And now that we're all good and depressed for the new year, the last one is, the only true belonging in this life that you have is your actions. That's your only belongings. And so the way that you breathe, how I'm with you in this moment, in this podcast, the way I show up for my family, my pet, my students, myself, is the actual only thing I really have. And that takes us into this deep principle of Ayurveda called karma. And that is the subtle practice of seeing that which I am both aware and unaware of, bringing that into consciousness. And my teacher says, opening our heart to it without centralizing around an egoic sense of self. So when we go back to the original definition of the word Ayurveda, which is to be situated in the truth, we come into that place of this deeper karmic practice of health, which is the eventual dissolution of our sense of separation from everyone else.
Well, I think, Katie, that's such a beautiful way of describing it. And I wasn't depressed at all. I actually think death is quite beautiful and is one of the motivators for us to live a very full life if we choose to utilize it in that manner. So I appreciate you giving us a little warning and then bringing us up to a state of hope, right?
Well, and it's empowering because it's really about what we do matters, and the way we think and the way we act and the way we choose, it does matter. There's always hope, right? Like, even in the worst of circumstances, this next moment is this opportunity to reverse engineer the karmic wheel that may not be helping you towards your goal. And that's really what we did all last year, right? In Ayurveda school, it's all about self-awareness, becoming more and more aware of who I am, why I do the weird things that I do, or even that I do them, And so Buddhism and Ayurveda have always kind of been close cousins. And in Buddhism, it says there are these 3 amas, poisons. And one of them is that I am greedy, and we all are, right? Like, I want more than probably I need, right? And it's like, oh, I overate over the holidays, or overdrank, or overshopped. And then the second one is that I'm avoidant, right? Like, here are all the things that I don't like about myself, about you, about this. And so that aversion and that craving actually create this whole cycle of lack of connection to who we really are. And then there's one more, and the last one is delusion. And as the kids say, delulu. And delusional is like, I'm not even going to look at this, right? I'm in denial. And that really is related to how we eat, who we choose to sleep with, what we put in our bodies, how we spend our time on social media or whatever, right? Like all of these choice points might be shrouded in these poisons. And it kind of sounds dramatic, but as you begin to, quote, purify them through your mind, through your heart, we just start to make better choices, and it's easy. And I think that's important to mention at like New Year's. It's like, if we set the resolution from the same consciousness that we have always, we won't be really getting different results. So Ayurvedic health is really, I think, when it's done well, about looking at the roots of the issues of why you might overeat or undereat or eat junk or, all the things that we do.
Yeah, beautifully stated. I totally agree. So when you were founding your school on the program, why did you choose just to create a program for women rather than being for men as well? Because I know this applies to all of us.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I've never been asked that question on a podcast. I don't really think it was like a deeply conscious choice at the time. I was young. The people that came to my yoga trainings were almost only and always women. And, when I first studied Tantra, I had a male teacher. And I also noticed that 80% of the people that came to him were women. So I don't know if it's has to do with the fact that I was a woman. I just think that so many women are interested in spirituality and health right now. I mean, we could talk about why, but speculate. So there wasn't like this deeply conscious overt thing. It just felt like these are my people. These are who are coming. These are who are interested in what I'm doing. And therefore, I'm going to focus on them. But now, as I'm older and we've been running it for a long time, I see that it's really valuable that it is only women. There's something that all beings are creatures of the divine with feminine and masculine within, but I think having this women's only space has been just so healing for so many of us, given that they say 1 out of every 3 women has been the victim of sexual assault. And we could add to that with compassion that probably about the same amount of men as well. So it's not just a women's problem, but to have a gathering place of only women, for me and for those women, has just been really sacred. We talk about women's issues. We talk about things that have always been the fire keeping realm of women, which is birth and death and medicine and our body. And so it is this place. And I often, will be asked, like, are you ever going to open it up to men? And it's like, no. Like, I love men. I freaking love men, but I'm not that teacher for men. And so, yeah, that's why I wanted women to have a place.
That makes perfect sense. And you mentioned when we're talking about certain processes and things that only women can go through within our own bodies, which of course impacts our mental state too, our spiritual state, all the other things. And that was something that I was deeply interested in when I signed up for the program, was to focus on the women's health, just because I had some question marks for myself. And then also just those around me. We hear so many stories about women with endometriosis or other crazy challenges and how common it is. And I just thought there's got to be something that's different out there. And I really appreciated many of the teachers and their approaches to some pretty sensitive topics. And that makes sense to me as to why we would have just ladies only. Well, I'm curious, what is the difference between like Ayurvedic form of or feminine form versus what it would look like for the masculine?
Yeah. So again, going back to the young Katie that started this school, it's called the Shakti School, and Shakti means power, and women have it, men have it, but it's feminine power. It's this life force we call prana or energy. It's the raw embodied life. It's nature, mother nature, if you will. And so that feminine aspect, we could call it that, right? Of course, all creatures have this. All of life has this. And then you have what we call the masculine, which is the open, empty field of pure consciousness, which is also in all of us. So you have these 2 primary principles in Ayurvedic medicine of consciousness and energy or matter that lives in matter. And the idea is that you're bringing consciousness to energy and energy to consciousness. And these two are, quote, making love, right? And it's like this union. And that's the definition of yoga. And of course, all of this is being done in the psyche or the mind or the being. And so that's like kind of on a more esoteric level. Feminine form Ayurveda was an answer and a response to the way in which I had learned Ayurveda, which I appreciated. There's many benefits to it, where it was very much codified, rules-based, structured, linear, very similar to the way an allopathic medical doctor would learn. And that's a tradition, and that's an honored tradition. And there's some weird, dark stuff to that that's out of balance. And so my idea was to create a place where the intuition, the emotion, and most importantly, raw, primal Shakti energy would be given a form and a frame to flow and move and adapt. And that really is what Ayurveda is actually truly about, which is what they teach us, right? Like, you are not a physical body only. You're not a mental body only. You're an energy body. And that actually is the root of healing. So why are we skipping over this energy body? And then beyond that, you're an intuitive body. And beyond that, you're a soul and your spirit body and your causal body. So why are we skipping these really important, subtle places within us and focusing solely on the physical and even the psychological? Why? Well, it's because none of us grew up learning about our energy body. Yeah. We grew up with the gym and sports, physical. We grew up going to the doctor, physical, and we grew up as psychological beings. You got an A+ on your science exam. So we understand those two bodies. And so Ayurveda largely, especially as it has been moving in time through the West and East, has become very much in that form of allopathic Western medicine. So my idea was we need to like keep all the good of Western and allopathics and Eastern as well, because the Eastern are just as structured and masculine as the Western. There's this false idea that in India and China and Japan, no. Like, those countries literally have been stripped of the spirituality of their folk medicines as well, unless they haven't. And so this is re-infusing spirit into our healthcare. That's what feminine form does. And really, it should be called the Shiva Shakti School, because we need the feminine and the masculine in what my teacher calls a matured form. Immature masculine and immature feminine are no fun to be around. Just hang out with teenagers.
Glorious. Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown. And I think maybe you had alluded to it briefly, but I want to kind of go back into this vein in regards to the feminine form, feminine energy, intuition being removed, and why it seems that there, in many different spaces and places, there seems to be this strong resurgence occurring right now. If you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I remember, so we have 20 different teachers at the school, and one of them is a woman named Indu Aurora, and she said, the feminine is not rising. She never went away. You can't get rid of her. Women don't need to be empowered. You already are. It's this idea, and I get it because we need language sometimes. There has been this devaluing of the magical, and the magical given less supremacy than the logical. When you really get into the trenches of health, doctors have no idea why people get better. Some people take the medicine and get better. Some people take the medicine and don't. It is mystery. And that is super uncomfortable. We do not like, especially in our culture, we do not like the mystery. We do not like the fundamental truth of groundlessness. None of us are in control here. And that is terrifying. to the ego. And so what the ego does is set up all these systems and structures and things. And that's great because then we get to be comfortable and cozy and we get an iPhone and we get potato chips and we feel good. But there's something in the back of our mind that knows this isn't going to last forever. And that is the feminine. The feminine really is this fundamental groundlessness. One of my teachers is Pema Chodron, and she says the truth of reality is fundamental groundlessness. But the bad news is you're in fundamental groundlessness. But the good news is that there also is no ground. So you're falling through space and time without any sense of control, but there's also not a ground. And we do this mudra, this hand gesture in Shakti School, just as a remembrance of paradox is truth. And so how can we open to the mystery and the terrifying reality that we are not in control and make it nice, make it comfortable, and honor the body as much as we can so that we can stay on the planet in a way that is comfortable enough to practice for longer and longer periods of time.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, while we're kind of in this conversation around duality, what are the Ayurveda sex types?
Yeah. From fundamental groundlessness and death to sex is very wise because, Freud says there are two forces in reality, and one is sex or eros, and the other is death. And they ride very closely together. The French call the orgasm le petit mort, the small death. The Ayurvedic understanding of reality is that there are three core things that we should be concerned about as humans. One is what food we put in our body. And we can make the argument that anything we take in through the senses is food. And then the other one is sleep. And then the last one is, quote, sex or energy, the way we choose to spend our time and who we choose to spend our time with on a kind of superficial scale. And then on an intimate, deep scale, it's like who you're allowing in your body, right? Or if you're a man, whatever. So sex is huge. And I'm also like a lover of the Taoist tantric tradition. And in Taoism, so much of medical material from the Taoist tradition is about sex and the way that our sex life can help us heal our bodies. And when we're having loving, connected sex with someone that loves and adores and respects us, we create a life force energy, whether that be to create a baby or just to create more energy for ourselves. And so there's this deep tradition in Taoism and Tantra around energy generation. But here's the downside. Sexual energy is like nuclear energy. And so we can use it to like power up a whole city with lights. Yay. Or we can use it to bomb the city. So, I'm from a backwoods hillbilly culture. And in my lineage, we had a lot of drama in relationships. I'm sure I'm not the only one. So sex is this place where we also meet the vestiges, the ghosts of our lineage. And the way our grandmama and granddaddy had fights and troubles and traumas and dramas, right? And so in Ayurveda, we spend a whole month on sex because it's such a big part of our psychological, mental, emotional, and physical health. You asked me about the three types. And so to me, it's like, everybody listening, you just have to come to our school because like so much I want to say about it. But Ayurveda breaks the sex types down in the same way they break down the doshas. And so if you are more of a kapha type, you are going to probably have a little bit more challenging time getting turned on. It might take you a little longer. But once it happens, it's on. It's like you flip the light switch, and there's an enduring quality to sexuality, especially for men. So Liz out there listening, or people who sleep with men. if you are with a kapha man, it's going to take a little bit to push him to arousal, but then it will endure. Yay, right? Same with women, but especially with men, because women and men do have very different sexual responses. This is very true. Then you have the fire types sexually, and then we could talk about, well, what happens when you get kapha with kapha. And some of you out there listening, you're like, kapha with kapha. You guys have to really stimulate one another mentally, emotionally, and physically. You need to like jump rope together, go dry brush, sauna, go on jogs, exercise, pick on each other lovingly. You need to stimulate. Otherwise, I've seen this. Two kapha people that get married, they just get happy and chubby and they never have sex. They're just laying in bed together and they're like, "Do you want ice cream?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then they're just eating the ice cream. I'm generalizing, right? Because vatas eat ice cream too. So like then you have the fire types, and that's going to be there's like this joke in Ayurveda about fire types in the bedroom are like competitive with their sex life. They're like in bed, like athletically having sex, right? And competition. And those type of people, whereas a kapha can have sex every night and like have the stamina for that, fire types can have sex a couple times a week. That's like their I'm giving you the rules, right? Then we break them. But that's kind of the deal, like once or twice a week, a pitta type, a fire type, healthily within the age range. And then you have the vata types, and those are going to be the types that naturally, whereas it's very easy to get fire types to get sexually turned on, the vata types are going to get turned on the quickest, but disinterested the fastest. So they can get turned on very quickly, but then they run out of stamina. So these are our more, long, lanky, cool, temperatured, thinner boned, thinner skin, thinner everything, right? Thinner hair. Those people actually in Ayurveda, and I want to share this because it can be such a relief for people. They're not having sex every week, even. They might have sex, they might be happy with sex once a week or less, maybe twice a month. And I'm talking about young people, not just older folks. Like it might be enough for you to have sex once or twice a month because that's your nature. And I love this because women and men, but women are told like, "Oh, you should be having sex every night with your partner." Absolutely not. And that's not what the teachings say. When you first meet someone, sure. When you're 23, sure. But as we mature and as we grow with our partners, we really do need to have that information about what our types are. And it can be very helpful because imagine you're a vata woman and married to a pitta man, there's going to be issues. Or you're a vata woman with a kapha man, he's going to crush you, and in a way, there are no rules because one of the best things for a vata woman is a kapha man. So, we could throw this up against the wall for pardon the pun, but like for a long time, there's a lot of ideas that we can generate through this lens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a very helpful taste and tease for what folks can find within the program because it is densely packed with amazing information and just so much beautiful richness in all that you and the teacher share, and then the additional resources that come through. And my focus is somatic sexology, and looking at intimacy through the lens of Ayurveda was actually very eye-opening and helpful. So I was very grateful that was included, not just for my own understanding and relating, but also for people that come to see me. So I'm very happy that it was included. And Katie, I'm curious, I have just a few more questions for you. And then we'll give you the floor to share anything that's left within your heart. But the first one is, if you could wave a magic wand that would generate something anywhere in the world, all over the world, planet, universe, whatever, what would you use your magic wand for?
What a question. I mean, it's super easy, that answer, actually. It would be that we would all know the realm of the bodhisattva. And that, for those of you that don't know, that Sanskrit sattva means the clear seeing wisdom of the heart. And that we would be that embodied, that we could all see the truth of who we really are. And if we could do that, then everything would clean up pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
And my last question, which I ask everybody, is if you could go back in time and talk to a younger Katie, to what age would you go? And what would you say?
Well, I'm already laughing because I feel like I don't have to go back in time, because so many of the younger Katies like ride along with me still, and we're in communion and conversation. And, I think the first words that come to my mind, it reminds me of the Hawaiian practices of health, and that is, I'm sorry. Yeah. I had a amazing experience yesterday. We had a workshop with 30 people on crafting this heart-centered approach to the new year, which is actually not the new year at all. It's the death of winter. It's actually the great dying off. And a friend, a lady, came up to me at the end, and she said something about her inner little girl. I said, I love your little girl. She's a friend. I know her very well. I love your little girl. And she goes, I love yours. And I thought, that's amazing how easy it is for me to love hers and her to love mine, but I don't always love mine. In fact, she's annoying and I'd rather her be gone, because those little parts are the parts that manifest now as the adult, as the parts that we find the most reprehensible.
Yeah.
So, what you asked is so big, because if we are able to actually hold tenderness around those parts and stay with them and not become them, that's pretty much what enlightenment's about.
Yeah. How beautiful. And I love that you said they ride along with you.
Yeah, I don't have to go to the past, girl. She's here.
Well, I've done a lot of retrievals of me. When I learned that beautiful practice, it really answered a lot of questions for me. And now, like just yesterday, I was having some really big emotions, and the way I was describing my feelings, well, the way I described it was, I'm feeling emotionally delicate. And I'd never used that way of describing my emotions, but that was so accurate. And when I had some space to myself, I was able to go in and just ask, okay, who's showing up right now? What version of me is here? And I could see different points of me on my life's timeline all the way up into the present, and provide each of them with like some time to communicate with me, give them some love, let them know they're here, but also the higher self of me, the present, more adult, wiser, but not the most wise self, was able to just let them be heard without them completely taking over me, which I think there's many times where that still happens. But the retrieval process and just in providing that space is really beautiful.
Mm.
And yeah, it feels like a healthy relationship.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it's so hard because sometimes they took over, as you said, like they possess you and you think they're you. Yeah, I totally resonate with what you're saying. And one word that comes to mind when you're able to actually step back, and for me, it's a lot around like not handing her off, especially to like a man, right? Like, actually don't hand her off. He does not know what to do with her either. It's not going to end well. Like, actually just pausing and holding that feeling, because that's how it shows up, right? Even though it tastes so bad in the moment, it's like you're eating a shit sandwich. Like, if you can just hold her and stay with, get dignity, self esteem, which is like, as you know, so much bullshit about self-esteem. Like it has something to do with the way you look or your clothes or being a bad bitch.
Mhm.
When I hear this, I'm a bad bitch, like I get it, but really? Are you a bad bitch?
Mm.
What is that? The only way we become the best meaning of the bad bitch is actually by becoming the most messy Tinder bitch on the planet. Like, it's the opposite of all this hard ass fronting. It's like the complete opposite. And that's where self esteem comes from.
Yeah.
That you've been kind and tender to the parts of you that are literally not a bad bitch.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to me, like, the my strength is actually my softness,
Totally.
and removing those layers and walls and feeling into it and allowing me to love me beyond the heart walls and all the other beliefs and things has allowed me to show up not just for myself, but those around me who are really going through it and not feel unsafe, right? Feeling like, okay, I know that that's them and they need tenderness and love. And that doesn't have to necessarily impact me because I've gone there in myself and I know what it feels like to be there.
Mm.
And I see you, I got you. And it's really beautiful. And I love that you had said, when these different aspects of us show up, not to hand them off to, in particular, like the man, right? And I can recognize that as a pattern of mine back in the day. Like I really wanted them to hold that, but the reality is like, no, I can hold her, and you got your own little boy to hold.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a lifetime practice, isn't it?
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, magical. Well, Katie, I've enjoyed chatting with you and having this one-on-one time. And I would love to just open up the floor. If there's anything else you would love to touch on, share where everybody can find your work, please, it's yours.
Thank you. Wow. I mean, you never know what you're going to get when you hop on these podcasts. And I just have had so much fun with you. I feel like you're just like a sister. And thank you for having such deep questions that have enabled both of us, I think, to share what we love and care about. As we've been talking about, we have a school. It's a women's empowerment school, but really so much more. It's an Ayurveda certification, it's Lady Life School, it's Soul School, it's Sistership School. I am both the founder and like Rogaine, like the user, like I need it. I'm there every week with you all. It's live, but we offer it as recordings as well. And that starts January 15th. So I'm sure we'll have like a special link for you through your podcast that we'll give your listeners. And we offer them a little discount on behalf of you and your podcast. So yeah, if they're interested, we're at theshaktischool.com. They can email me at info@theshaktischool.com. And yeah, come on in, join us.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned all of the ways in which the school actually is. And there's many, many words that can be used to describe what you all are doing. But the word that I want to use is just, it's magic. And it is so beautiful and all encompassing. So thank you so much for having the audacity to create such a beautiful program and a space for all of us to show up and tap into a deeper way of connecting with ourselves and the world around us. It's really beautiful.
Thank you so much. I love your word. Thank you.
Yeah, great, great. And thank you to everyone who's been here to tune in to Katie Silcox in this episode of Her Drive. As always, I invite you all to please leave a review and to take some time and share this with anyone who you believe their heart could truly receive the medicine of today's episode. Thanks, guys. Love you.